Welcome back, Exercise Confidence listeners and followers. Today on the pod, we have the newly titled Dr. Jen here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited about this guest, you guys, because I've been following her journey for quite a while now, and she is a recent medical school graduate. So I'm going to yes, woohoo, we love this. Very exciting. I'm going to kick it off with the typical question I start and most interviews start with, which is, can you please tell us about yourself in about 30 to 60 seconds?
Of course. My name is Jen Reinmuth-Birch. Like she just said, I just graduated from medical school about a week ago. At the tender age of 55, I started medical school a couple of months before my 51st birthday. And I'm just about to set off on a journey across the country to start my residency.
Oh my gosh, that is so exciting. Okay. And you were telling me that you're kind of, splitting your places where you live. Obviously, you're moving and then where you're currently podcasting from. So just give us a little bit of insight as to where life has led you up to this point and where it's taking you next in your medical journey.
Yes. Well, I'm a native Pacific Northwesterner, born and raised in Oregon, went to college in Oregon, lived in Portland for a little over a quarter century. My husband and I now live on a little farm on the Washington coast, and we divide our time between our farm and also living in a converted school bus, which was a little project we started when our twins were in high school. And when COVID kind of shut everything down, we started homeschooling and never looked back. And so we started just living and working remotely in the bus. So we've been taking our bus. Her name is Hope. And we live in her now, and she's on her way about to make the giant trip across the country from Washington to Maine for residency. So it's going to be a long haul.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, that sounds like it's been a very adventurous couple chapters that you've had in the last, 6 or so years. So you mentioned, okay, the pandemic happened, and then we all know how that affected everybody's lives.
Yes.
And from, this aspect of not only homeschooling your twins and then converting this bus, I'm going to say right around there had to have been in the middle of or towards the beginning of you deciding to venture into medical school. Is that right?
That is exactly right. Our twins were just about ready to graduate from high school, and everyone was asking them, oh, what do you want to do after graduation? What do you want to do after graduation? And my husband looked at me and said, what do you want to do after they graduate? And it kind of stopped me cold. I'm like, well, no one ever asks the mom that. And the words, I want to be a doctor, just like flew out of my mouth. And he kind of stopped cold and was like, where did that come from? And I said, it's something I've always wanted to do. And I laughed at the time. I was 48 then. And I just kind of laughed and said, but it's not going to happen. And he said, well, why not? And I said, well, I don't know if you've realized, but I am 48. It's not your typical age. And he said, yeah, well, so. And I said, well, I've got to retake all of my prerequisites. None of them. I went to school before the internet even existed. Like they have all long expired. And he said, well, then take them. And I was like, but then I have to take this horrible exam. It's called the MCAT. And he's like, well, then do it. And every time I'd come up with a reason why I thought I couldn't, he would just kind of knock it down and say, but you can. And I know you can. And he said, my biggest fear is if you don't go for it, there's this little part of you that's going to die with the dream. And he said, I don't ever want you to have that remorse. I mean, we always say I'd rather have remorse than regret. I'd rather do something and go, wow, that was a terrible idea, than just always wonder what could have happened. And so he's like, just go for it. I feel like you just really need to try. And I used to run marathons back in the day when I had knees that didn't hate me.
Wow.
And my husband told me, this is going to be like one of your marathons. And he said, and again, I can't run it with you, but I promise that I will hand you water bottles at every mile. And he has, absolutely 100%. So, every time I thought I had a reason why I couldn't do it, he would just had a million reasons why I could. So, well, as we were traveling across the country, the boys were studying for their SATs, and I started studying for the MCAT and started prepping for all my prerequisites. So it was about a 2-year process before I was even able to apply. And yeah, it all started in the school bus, and it's all ending in the school bus.
And that's a really fun kind of full circle with the fact that this conversation is mostly going to be about your academic journey, right?
Exactly.
So that is so that I love when I get to hear what is kind of a catalyst to somebody making a decision. It's always different, it's always personal. In your case, it just came out, it was already there inside of you, and then your husband was just such a great support and kind of giving you a counter to every excuse or reason not to. Has that always been the case with your guys' relationship, at least?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My husband, Norm, he and I have been married for a little over 12 years now. So he came into my life. I went through a pretty horrific divorce when my twins were just turning 5. And he came into our lives when they were 11 and just, immediately stepped into our crazy, chaotic life of me with these twin boys and just stepped right into it and just became husband and father just seamlessly. And, we always tried to structure our relationship around what my husband always describes as the 5. You've got your 5 pillars of the relationship. Physical, are you both active? Are you both outdoorsy? Emotional, are you both pretty even tempered, or are you all over the board? Spiritual, do you believe in something or do you not? It's fine if you do, fine if you don't, but it's better if you both do or don't. Financial, were we both financially stable so one didn't have a power dynamic over the other? And intellectual, were we both curious? Were we both readers? Were we both? And that was something that we talked about, and we kind of chuckled, and I was like, I've always had maybe 3 with guys before, but never, and with him it was the solid 5. So the only logical answer was just to marry him and stay with him for the rest of my life.
Oh my goodness, I can deeply identify with that. I think more than a handful of times since I've relaunched the podcast, I always get so excited or happy to share my own relationship with my husband, because he and I met when we were in college. And when you were talking about the way that Norm's response was to you wanting to go to medical school, it was the same thing. I'm an attorney, and so during the pandemic, I kind of had the same thing of like, I think I want to apply to law school. And even in our wedding vows, we were just rewatching our video the other day. He made mention of the fact that it's not our dreams aren't dreams, or just realities waiting to be uncovered that we support each other through. And it's so true. And I feel, for lack of a better, more deeper term, I always feel so lucky. But I would really love for you to just give a little bit of insight to the listeners. And I would say especially to, I would say female, but also, anybody that maybe isn't in the most supportive relationship, just as to why you think it is important, especially when you're going after your dreams or trying to create the life that you want, why it's important to have that kind of support, but then also matching up in those pillars that you were talking about.
Well, I think a lot of it is, for me, it's very generational too. Growing up, my family was supportive, but, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. I had high school teachers that said, oh, for chemistry, let's have the girls sit in the back. You're not going to understand this anyway. I had a college advisor who, when I said I really wanted to take a bunch of science classes, was like, oh, no, you don't want to do that. Let the boys do that. And she laughed, I remember at the time, and said, just marry a doctor. And that's easier. And, a botany professor who said, I wish I could give 2 lectures, one to the boys, one to the girls, so I could dumb it down for the girls. It was a very generational thing. And it was sort of, as we were going through that, there was also this sort of new wave coming on in the 80s of all of a sudden women can be anything. Like we were told, you know, the old ads with you can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan and you can be anything. And we saw, you know, Sally Ride, we saw Billie Jean King, you know, we saw Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we saw women that were strong and intelligent and competitive and independent. But at the same time, it was also that 70s, 80s time when, like, you know, Dukes of Hazzard and the Love Boat, and girls were expected to, you know, weigh 90 pounds and be attractive and agreeable and have their bosoms hanging out. And that was, you know, it was sort of that dichotomy. And so I think growing up, it was very difficult to find a real strong role model that didn't force you into too many different pockets, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, we always told women back then, like, oh, you can have it all. You can have it all. You can go be a corporate executive and come home and have a family, and you can, but it's freaking exhausting. And nobody ever expected that of men. They said, well, of course you can be a corporate executive, but your wife will take care of the kids. And with us, it was told, oh, you can be a corporate executive, but you're still expected to. So we had these just extremely unrealistic expectations. So I think I kind of carried that into this decision, thinking I've got to do it all myself. I've got to take care of the kids and I've got to do this all myself. And my husband immediately was like, no, you don't. You were a single mom for so many years and you did take care of everything and you did handle the kids and school and work and everything on your own. And for him to be able to come in and say, I'm not expecting you to be a million different women at once. I'm expecting you to be a medical student. I want you to focus on being a medical student. Let me handle everything else. And he did. And he absolutely did, you know, cooking, the cleaning, managing everything else, because medical school is all encompassing. And I think just finding a partner that recognizes that while women can do it all, we shouldn't have to. You know, we should be able to pursue our careers and have some help at home. We should be able to raise our kids and have some help in the workplace, you know, and I think that's the piece that's been missing. We've been told for so many years, oh, you can do all the things. But in the workforce, there are very, very few accommodations for women who do have children who are working. It's very difficult. And at the home, you can be told you can take care of your kids, you can go have a career, but who's going to help out with the kids at home and who's going to help take care of the house? So I think having a partner who recognizes that and is able to say there aren't, you know, wife jobs and husband jobs. This everything was pooled when he and I got together. And I think that was the biggest piece is having someone who was also raised in that generation and kind of looked and said, you know, no, that isn't how that's going to be. You are going to be a medical student. Focus on that. I got everything else. And that was huge. So huge.
Again, like I'm just sitting here like beaming, hearing about this. And again, this is not to make it too much about myself, but it's one of those things where you're saying things that like I feel so fortunate to have also lived. And I understand it's a generational thing. So I will say I'm fortunate for the generation that I'm in, even though not everybody in my generation is the way my husband is. But like in law school, when I was studying for the bar, we lived in a complex with my best friends who were also studying for the bar. And it's same thing. You are studying 12, 16 hours a day, depending on what you got to get done. And he made like this menu of these like punny foods for breakfast. And if everybody, in order to incentivize us all to get up and be in like the study room together at a certain time, if you were up and in and you text your breakfast order by like, I think it was 7 or 8 a.m., you had breakfast, whatever you wanted ready and there for you. And same thing, like I didn't wash a dish. I didn't do my own laundry, I think, for that entire time. And it's just one of those things where like when you get the opportunity to, you ebb and flow with it. Same thing. After I was done with law school, he got an MBA and it was easier for me. I was just focusing on work and I was way more able to just come home and help with all of the house stuff. But just that support is so priceless. And so kind of you being able to live through two different sides of that coin, not only in relationship, but also in terms of the support that you had even in your own academic journey to begin with. When you were an undergrad, what did you study and what were you pursuing then?
Bear in mind that was 30 some years ago.
Oh, sure.
No, when I started college, it was the late 80s. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I majored in art history with a theater arts minor. But I mean, I essentially majored in drinking beer at the sorority house. That was pretty much my major right there. Let's just own that. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Absolutely no clue. And I kind of graduated and then sat there and dabbled with the idea of graduate school. I actually even dipped a toe into the idea of law school. I took the LSAT and everything and thought about that, and then was just like, I don't know. And so I was just kind of working at a coffee shop and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, what happens to a lot of us when we kind of don't really know what we want to do with our life, we find a man who says, I'll just take care of everything and I'll make all the decisions. And at the time I was just feeling very scattered and unsure. So I thought that sounds like a great idea. In retrospect, not a great idea. I got 2 extraordinary children out of it, but the rest of it was not great. So, I had wanted to be a doctor when I was little, but like I kind of said, that was sort of drummed out of me by teachers who said girls aren't good at math, the girls can't take science, you don't want to do that. And it never died though. It was always there, and I always loved science and I loved math. And it was funny because it wasn't until my boys were like in junior high and high school, and one of my boys was quite good at math, so he was taking advanced math, and he was like, oh, can you help me? And I was like, no, I'm not good at math, because I'd always been told I wasn't. And then I started helping him, and all of a sudden I went, wait a minute, I'm actually really, really good at math. I'm like, wait, what? I was like, well, let's try some of this science, shall we? And then, when I was homeschooling the boys, I was kind of learning the biology and the chemistry and the physics and everything along with them, and realizing not only do I love it, I'm actually pretty darn good at this. When I no longer had that external voice telling me, you can't do it, you're not good at this. It was like, oh, I actually am. And then it's sort of that little spark kind of ignited again, going, maybe I could be a doctor. Maybe I could.
You mentioned right now kind of the external messaging that you received and how it was just so inherently easy to take at face value, right? You even said it to yourself. You even said it to your kids. Oh, I'm not good at math because of what was said to you. Shifting to the internal voice that we carry within ourselves, has that been something that you've always been able to keep a positive voice on for yourself, or have you struggled with some of that negative self-talk as a result of the external negative talk that was kind of being fed to you?
Oh, sure. I think we all do to a certain extent. It was hard to not when it was kind of coming from all sides of the room. I didn't have a particularly supportive first spouse, and there was some negative talk there. There was negative talk from, like I said, professors, educators. But as far as self-doubt, I guess maybe I never really silenced self-doubt entirely. I just stopped giving it the final vote. It no longer has the final say. Like, starting medical school at 50, that meant walking into rooms where I was older than most of my professors. I was the same age as most of my classmates' parents. And I mean, there were moments where I questioned, I'm like, do I belong here? But I mean, I think over time and over the years, I've realized that confidence and self-belief, it doesn't come from feeling fearless. It comes from deciding that my purpose matters more than my fear. And I think at 50, I understood something, and now at 55, I understand something that I didn't understand when I was younger, which means that, being uncomfortable in a situation doesn't mean that you shouldn't be there. Being uncomfortable doesn't mean you're unqualified. Being uncomfortable means you're being challenged. It means you're growing. It's a learning opportunity. And, I just kind of stopped comparing myself to everyone around me and just blocked out the voices, and, suddenly realized where people had said like, oh, you're too old to do this. And I was like, no, I have life experience, but that's an advantage, not a liability. I mean, by the time I started medical school, I'd already survived hard things. I had already failed a lot of things. I had already rebuilt myself. I had already cared for people. I had already experienced illness and death. I had learned resilience. So at that point, medical school challenged me intellectually, but my life had already strengthened my character. It had already built up those calluses. And so I think just slowly over time, I had to kind of keep turning that dialogue from, you're not good enough to do this. You're not good enough. You're too female, or you're too old, or you're too this, or you're too that. And so I had to sort of turn that comment of, am I good enough to do this? And turn that into, am I willing to keep showing up? And every day, that's what I did, whether it was for my kids or at work or in school, just keep showing up. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, just, you don't have to be fearless. Confidence isn't lack of fear. Confidence is just showing up. Just keep showing up. And the more you keep showing up, the quieter those voices get, because it's really, really hard for someone to keep telling you, you can't do this when you're doing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talking about, again, the showing up and the getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Are you somebody who has kind of always believed that they could do anything that they wanted to try to do?
I've always been someone, I always told my kids, I was like, sometimes I think your mom has more guts than brains. I was one of those people that I was like, you know what, I'm going to try it, and I've had people who are just like, why are you doing that? And like I said, like, I would always rather have remorse than regret. I would always rather try something, even if it's just so out there and possibly dangerous, than to always wonder, I wonder what would have happened if, I could have done this. And I think that's kind of always been my nature. I mean, from the time I was a little kid, it was like, who wants to try this? I'll do it. And it was always like, oh, Jenny will do it. She's crazy. And so that's just kind of always been my nature, is just, like I said, no one's ever called me reserved. But I think just kind of just always that sort of unflagging optimism that just is part of my nature. I mean, do I have times when I get down? Sure. Do I have times when I feel like, oh, this isn't great? Of course. But, that's the weather that comes and goes. My climate is pretty nauseatingly optimistic. So I'm one of those people that it's like those little Weeble dolls we had when we were little, where you knock them down and they bounce back up. That's kind of always been me. So I just think I've been one of those people that was never afraid to try, and I've gotten knocked down plenty of times, and I've failed at countless things, but I've always been willing to try.
The thought of your weather being situational versus, your climate being your constant, I've not heard that before. And I'm going to be that sentiment with me when I face, my own challenges, or maybe when I'm a little more in my head than I ought to be about something. So that is something that is really insightful. And I appreciate you sharing that. So speaking of kind of more of the situational, when you decided, okay, I'm really going to take this serious, I'm really going to go ahead with these prerequisites again. What was that journey like for you? And kind of what did your life look like going into that? Because I know you'd mentioned you were fortunate enough to be able to be homeschooling the boys at the time that they graduated. Mm-hmm. And how does one decide to basically do a full 180 in their life and take those next steps?
Well, I had also been working in autism research and autism advocacy. One of my twins has autism. And so he was the catalyst for that whole career. And I'd been doing that for quite a few years. So I wasn't completely out of the academic sphere. So I was still kind of, I still had my toe in the academic pool. So, I'd been doing that for quite some time. And I just completely lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay. I was just asking kind of, I wasn't really sure where your background was at the point when either academically or professionally, yes, when you decided like, hey, I'm going to redo these prerequisites. And what does that look like? I mean, do you enroll in community college? Do you go back to university? Do you get a tutor? Like, what is that, journey? Well, how does that first step start?
There are so many different options now, which I wasn't aware of because, like I said, it had been 30 years since I'd been an undergrad. And now, like, I mean, so many different universities, Arizona State University, Oregon State University, the University of New England, those are ones that just pop to mind, have entire bachelor's, pre-med programs, master's degrees that are all online, where you can do all of your labs, where they send the lab kits to your home and where you videotape yourself doing the
Oh,
labs
wow.
and all of that. And I had gone to Oregon State back in the, yeah, it was so cool. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, which, you know, obviously we didn't have the internet, so we didn't have online classes, tell you that right now.
Yeah.
But kind of to be able to go back to my alma mater and say, hey, Oregon State, I need these prereqs. And I talked to someone in advising and they said, oh yeah, you can just enroll at a university as a non-degree student and you can just take the prereqs wherever. And so, you know, I know a lot of folks who have taken them at community colleges, a lot of them who took them online, you know, for more of your non-traditional students who aren't already on a college campus, it takes a little more doing. So I did almost all of mine at Oregon State, which was kind of fun because that was right at the point when one of my boys had just been accepted at Oregon State. And I was like, oh, we're at OSU at the same time. That's so cool. So yeah, so it was actually really fun. I didn't realize how much I missed school until I was back in it. And just like, you know, sitting down with like my laptop and all my notes and my flashcards. And it was just like, oh, I was just nerding out. I absolutely loved it. I had no idea how much I missed it, which is probably why it's perfect that I chose medicine, because this is the one career where you're constantly learning. You know, you're never done learning.
What did your sons think when you let them in on this? Because I'm assuming maybe you and Norm, your husband, had this talk first, and then you
Yeah.
filled in your boys. What was their response?
They were not surprised because they're very used to their mom just saying, I'm going to do this thing. And they're like, okay. Like, I mean, they're just, like I said, like, I'm going to go skydiving. I'm going to live in a school bus. And they're just sort of like, yeah, that's mom. Completely unfazed. Not surprised at all. And, you know, I'd been telling them, you know, I feel like I want to do something more. I feel like I just, you know, I want to do more and get out of the research field and all this stuff. And they were very supportive, super excited. When I told them, I was like, all right, I'm going to go to medical school. They were like, all right, do it. Let's go, mom.
And you were fortunate enough, you mentioned, to also be able to attend medical school in the same area that you've called home, right? In the Pacific Northwest?
Yes, in the Pacific Northwest. My school is about 6 hours from where my family lives, though. So my boys, one of my boys, the one that had gone off to Oregon State, he'd gone off to campus. And then his twin brother, who has autism, actually moved to campus with me. And that was 6 hours from our home. So my husband kind of went back and forth between the farm and our apartment on campus. And then my son lived with me. And we were trying to get him used to kind of independent living because we wanted him to be able to have his own place. So my husband was like, all right, you are going to just be in charge of, you are going to do the cooking, you're going to do the cleaning, mom's going to show you how to do, you know, I showed him how to like pay bills and here's how you like hook up the internet. And so he got like a crash course with me kind of helping him along on independent living. And now he's got his own place in Portland and he's just got a great job and he's just living his best life. But yeah, he was my roommate during my preclinical years on campus.
Well, I'm sure that was a very like sweet and unique experience for the both of you.
It was pretty great. He was so cute too. He would come to campus. He would walk me there every day and back, and he would carry my backpack the whole way. So,
Aww.
You know, I'd come home and he'd be like, "I made a snack for you." I was like, "Oh, thank you. I'd like a snack. That sounds lovely."
And it's almost like the sweet full circle of like a role reversing, right? Because as mom, when they're little, if you're fortunate enough to live where you all can walk to school, you're probably carrying the backpack for them so they don't get tired. And then you pick them up and you have some, you know, some apples and peanut butter, some kind of good snack for them, ready to go before they have the after school activities or do homework. And just kind of flipping it to the other side. That's so funny.
It was so darn cute. So cute.
Oh, and you're starting medical school, right? You're in this new town, even though you're in the same region. And you're walking in on your first day. What did that feel like for you? Kind of going from, you know, getting the acceptance letters and then starting school, and then the reality that this is happening.
Well, and it was funny because I told my husband, I said, It's going to be like that episode of Full House when DJ starts junior high and she goes and like all the kids are cooler than her and she's like standing there with the tray and no one will talk to her. So she goes in the bathroom and I was like, that's 100% going to happen because they're going to be like, ew, who's this old lady? And, it was fun. I was very pleasantly surprised that that was never the case. I can honestly say I never felt that age gap the entire time I was in medical school. Never once. And I think maybe just med school is kind of the great equalizer. We're all sort of fighting the same battles. So, kind of all of those little barriers or things that made us different or non-traditional were pretty much eradicated the second we got there. And I've made lifelong friends. I was talking to my best friend one time and I'm like, is it weird to you that I'm literally 6 months older than your mother? She's like, I 100% do not even see it that way. She goes, I don't know, you're just Jen. And it's never really even occurred to me. And that was something that was such a wonderful surprise. It's just that nobody cared. Nobody cared at all. They were just like, are you easy to get along with? Are you a hard worker? Are you collaborative instead of competitive, which I strongly espouse in medical school? Are you just someone that I can work with for 18 hours without wanting to kick you down a flight of stairs? Like, in other words, like, I don't care how old you are. Are you a nice person and are you a hard worker? And that was kind of all it took in med school, the ability to be able to kind of hold ourselves together. And I think kind of my unflagging optimism that I mentioned before, I think was quite an asset because there were many times when we were all just like, falling apart. And it was like, okay, we got to bring the room up a little bit. Let's go.
It's so funny that you mentioned an age gap with a best friend. While mine is likely not as much as yours is, my best friend from law school is about 6 or 7 years younger than me. I went to law school like in almost when I was 30. And when we would get into those moments where we'd be in the study room and everybody's feeling really, she would say, okay, we're all standing up and we're dancing, right? Like, go figure that the youngest one in the group is like, we're putting on a song and we are all moving our body and we're turning off our brain for like 5 minutes and it's going to help us and we're going to feel better. And if we're going to feel miserable when we sit back down, okay, it's going to be there when we sit back down. But at least for these 5 minutes, we're going to try to not. And so, I think it's just, I love hearing other people have just great connections, regardless of, things like age or socioeconomics or what have you. And when you were, in the thick of it, right? Because you have your preclinical years, your clinical years, you're navigating a whole new space and you are navigating it in what is going to be termed an untraditional path and at an untraditional time in life. Did you ever deal with any imposter syndrome at all? And do you kind of know what that is?
Oh, absolutely. And I think any med student who tells you that they've never experienced imposter syndrome is lying. We all do. Every single one of us. I don't know a single person that has not been in medical school that didn't say, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here and I have no right to be here. But, I think we kind of always doubt ourselves, and I think that's when you've got to lean on that resilience piece. And I mean, I think before medical school, I used to think that like resilience meant, oh, I never doubt myself or, I never struggle. But, starting over, I'm kicking off a new career at 55. It's taught me that I think resilience is actually just the willingness to keep going again and again, keep starting over, even after disappointment, start over, after exhaustion, start over, after fear, start over, after failure, start over. So, I mean, there were a lot of days where that imposter syndrome would creep in, where I felt like I was behind, where I felt like I was overwhelmed. I would kind of question, do I belong here? But I learned that I think resilience kind of grows the more you just don't give up on yourself. And sometimes that looked like, okay, I'm just going to study for 1 more hour. Sometimes it was like, you know what, I need to just go to my professor and ask for help because I'm just not getting this. And sometimes it just meant like getting up in the morning and dragging your butt to campus when you were just feeling beat all to heck. I mean, and I think a lot of that too, just kind of, it does deepen with age. Life experience gives you a lot of perspective. I've experienced a lot of difficult seasons that a lot of my classmates just haven't yet, and it doesn't make me better or worse. It's just they're not there yet. Yeah. And I think with that knowledge comes a lot of strength. And it's just about kind of staying optimistic and staying hopeful and staying open-hearted and open-minded after life has booted you around a little bit. I had a classmate one time who was just sobbing after this cardiology exam, which was horrible. And I was like, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Jen, I failed the exam." And I was like, "Oh, honey, we all failed it. Like class average was like a 53. Like, and it was like we all bombed that one." And she just looked at me. She goes, "No, you don't understand. This is the worst thing that's ever happened in my life." And I was like, "Oh, buckle up."
Oh yeah.
Like, oh. And it was just like, but I get it. And it was, I would always have to kind of pause, because to me, I was like, "Oh, that's the worst thing." But then you have to remember, I go, no, because for her at 23, yeah, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to her. And likely down the road, there are going to be things that are going to make her look at that exam later and say, "Oh, I was nothing compared to everything I went through in my 30s and 40s. But, just kind of that ability to pause and go, "Oh," but for her, and I remember that was the worst thing ever. And so, yeah, we all, the imposter syndrome, absolutely. But the resilience will beat the imposter syndrome every time. Just grit and resilience. Just keep showing up. You can feel like, I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here. Well, again, you can't tell me I shouldn't be here if I'm here. So I'm just going to keep showing up.
Absolutely. And in relation to the mentality of, the grit and the resilience, and you had said earlier that you used to run marathons.
Yeah.
Did you ever find that you would kind of go back to any of your, mental, tricks or mental tips that you would use during marathons during medical school?
Oh, 100%. The one that I used all the time when I would look at like my rotation schedule, and I'd be like, all right, I've got 4 weeks of surgery, and then I've got 4 weeks of this, and then I've got 4 weeks of internal medicine, and then I've got like a week of nights, and then I'm doing this crazy emergency shift where I've got all these like hours that go from like 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. And I was like, oh, but I was like, no. Because when I would run marathons, if I would sit there and go, I have to run 26 miles, that's insanity. Nobody runs 26 miles. So when I would run, I would not tell myself I have to go 26 miles. I would say, I just need to run to that tree right there. And then I would run to that tree, and I would be like, now I just need to run up to that building with the blue sign. And I would run there, and I'd be like, now I just have to pass the guy in the green shirt. If you just kind of break it up into those smaller milestones. So it wasn't, I have to get through a year of these rotations. This is wild. It was like, I just have to get through to lunch today. So did I get to lunch? I did. I got through lunch. And then I'm like, okay, then we have a meeting at 3. I just need to get through that meeting these next 3 hours. And I think just chunking my days down and chunking my exam schedules down, because you could look at your schedule, your academic schedule in medical school, and it's horrifying. Just realizing that, okay, I don't have to obsess about this thing that's, at the end of the year, like just break it down in chunks, just chunk that stuff up. And that's exactly how I'm going to be approaching residency too. Everyone keeps telling me they're like, your intern year is a fever dream. It's just complete chaos. And I'm like, that's okay, because it's not a year. I don't have to get through an intern year. I just have to get through this week. And then I just have to get through this shift. And then I just have to, and I think that breaking it into more palatable and more achievable goals, rather than looking at this huge albatross, that old story about how do you eat an elephant, a bite at a time.
I was literally thinking of that when you started talking. I was like, oh my gosh, I was thinking exactly of that.
Exactly. So yeah, I think just instead of looking at it as this huge task, just breaking it into a bunch of mini tasks, just look at it a mile at a time.
Yeah. That's such a good way to look at it, especially when something can seem so daunting, so all-encompassing, so overwhelming. And then going a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, you've had a classmate who failing an exam at that point in their life, right? It was the worst thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah.
And because of your lived experiences and your differences in that regard of being an older student, what ways do you think your own differences, because of your lived experience, has been an advantage to you in entering the medical field and as a medical student?
I think a lot of it, and kind of coming back to the exercising confidence piece, at 55, just a lot more of a sense of self that I had back in my 20s and 30s. When you're in your 20s, you're still sort of in an evolutionary phase Whereas in your 50s, you're kind of more established in just who you are. And I think my self-confidence now and my sense of self is less connected to proving myself and having to achieve a goal, and just being more connected to knowing myself. Like 20 years ago, my confidence probably would have come from achievement. Like I got this, I passed this test, or I achieved this goal, or I got into this school, or, I lost those 10 pounds or whatever, and other people's approval. And now I think my confidence is quieter, but it's a lot more steady. It's no more about kind of asking, am I enough? Am I enough? It's just realizing I already am. I am, and that is enough. It's kind of a greater awareness of just who I am, a greater respect for everything I've been through in life, just a greater awareness of time, and realizing just how precious and valuable time is. Makes me very, very protective of my energy, my relationships. Like my husband always says, you're given a bag of minutes every day. Who do you hand them out to? Like, you hand those minutes out, and those minutes are gone. Yeah. So, you protect your minutes. And I think just aging, career changes, loss of a parent, caregiving, divorce, health issues, becoming an empty nester now. I think all of those experiences just kind of created deeper confidence, because they force you to rediscover yourself instead of just always putting your focus on, my kids, my job, my this, my that. You're forced to kind of be a little more introspective. And I think it's less of an external confidence of like, here, look at me proving myself, and more of just this internal confidence. It's less performative, and it's just more grounded.
Well, speaking of external sharing, the way that I found out about you, obviously, was through you putting your journey on social media. And so, not to say that it's any kind of contradiction to the confidence that you carry, but what was that like, choosing to not only, and again, I'm sure, certainly, I am sure we can certainly chalk part of it up to you always being able to kind of just say, why not do that? But deciding to share your journey of being an older student in medical school on social media, which is not always a kind place.
No, oh no.
Yeah. What was that? What was that? Decision, like, what was the catalyst? What sparked you wanting to share, and just how has it impacted your life since starting to share your journey?
I had a bunch of friends when I told them that I was going to start medical school at 50, right before my 51st birthday, that were like, we want to know what's going on. And I was like, it's going to be hard for me to be messaging people all the time, because my schedule is just going to be wild. And I was like, I'll start an Instagram. So you guys, it was just for like family and friends. You guys can just follow along. And it was a friend of my son's who was like, you should start doing reels. And I was like, I don't even know what a reel is. So talk me through this, Annie. And so, she kind of talked me through it. And I was like, oh, and she goes, well, you should really go on TikTok. She's like, because TikTok is like, you can do better videos. And I was like, I don't want to, I'm going to get kicked off TikTok. Like, I'm way too old. They're going to be like, get out of here, grandma. Like, you're not allowed. And she was like, no, you can do really cool videos. She goes, you don't ever even have to use it. Just open it up, just use it so you can make cool videos and put them on Instagram. So I was like, okay. And so I thought, oh, this actually is kind of cool. Like, I could do a pretty cool video on here. So I did one video just kind of talking about, it was just me addressing some of the comments I'd gotten from people where they're like, oh, you're going to be dead before you finish residency. You stole a spot in medical school. I feel sorry for your husband. And it was just kind of me addressing those and just being like, and I think I played Taylor Swift's You Need to Calm Down in the background or something. So I put that on TikTok, and then I transferred it over to Instagram, thought nothing of it. And 2 weeks later, Annie contacted me. She said, have you been on your TikTok? And I said, no, I just did it for that one video. She's like, Jen, you have 14,000 followers. And I was like, what? And she was like, no. And then I went on the TikTok. Now I do sound like a grandma. I'm on the TikTok. No. And so I was on that page, and I was looking at the video, and I was like, what? And I started looking at all of these comments. And I was like, because I've been telling my husband, this is kind of silly. I feel kind of lame. I'm probably not going to do any more of these. But then there were all these women who were saying, you gave me hope. I never thought I could do anything. I thought my life was over at 40, or I just went through a horrible divorce and I have no idea what to do with my life. Everyone keeps telling me my life is over at 50. My kids just left home. Oh my gosh, you just gave me hope. Like, I could do this. I can do this. So I thought, oh my gosh, well, I can't stop now. I was like, I can't. And so I just kind of kept making videos. And every time I would look at my husband and go, maybe this is silly. Maybe I should just stop doing this. I would get a message. Someone would say, like, because of you, I left my abusive husband. Because of you, I decided to apply to nursing school. Because of you. And it just sort of took off organically. And I've had a lot of people who said, they reach out to me and they're like, how do I grow my following? How do I grow? I'm like, I don't have a clue, because I didn't follow algorithms or do all the, like, when is the best time to post and have all the fancy software. It was kind of just me just sharing my story. And a lot of my posts are just me talking to people and just talking about my day and just sharing some insights I've had. And some of them are just kind of silly videos I do with my husband, who's such a good sport. But it's been amazing. And it's just, I've had some pretty extraordinary opportunities that have come from it.
Yeah, what would you say has probably been one of the coolest or most, like, out there things you never would have guessed, but you've gotten to experience as an opportunity as a result?
I met Noah Wiley this last weekend.
Are you kidding me?
I kid you not. Like,
wow.
No, I started working as a figs ambassador for the Figs Scrub Company, which is an extraordinary female-run company and female creators. They're these brilliant, unbelievable women. And so I started working as a figs ambassador. And then I had done a breast cancer campaign with them. And so I went down and did a shoot in California. So I was on some marketing for that. And then they contacted me in 2024 and said, we have a huge advocacy department. Figs is not just scrubs. It is healthcare advocacy. There's like bills on the Hill that come from Figs. And they said, we've got these bills that we're looking to promote. Would you be interested in coming to Washington, D.C. with a group of people? And I was like, absolutely. So a bunch of us went up to the Hill in 2024. So I was able to do some amazing healthcare advocacy. And then they just recently, they were like calling out to the ambassadors. They're like, hey, we've got Healthcare is Human rally. It's going to be on Capitol Hill. We're going to have some great speakers, and we would love to have as many of you who can come on out. So I was just like, I got some downtime. So flew out to Washington, D.C. and, walk up to the rally, and I'm like, face to face with Noah Wiley. I was like, well, hello. And met his mom, who's an absolute hoot. If you watch The Pit, his mom is Nurse Dana. She's amazing. She is Nurse Dana. She's just incredible. And so I was talking with Marty Wiley, and she's just a hoot. And, kind of we're sharing our stories. And I mentioned that I went to medical school like a little before my 51st birthday. And then after the rally, Noah Wiley comes up and he's like, hey. And I was like, well, hello. And he just, did my mom say, are you the one that went to medical school in her 50s? And I said, yeah, that was me. And he was like, wow. And he shakes my hand. He's like, congratulations. That's great. And I was like, and I just looked at him. I said, well, yeah, so you can too. Then you can become a real doctor. And he was like, oh God, no, absolutely not.
Oh my God. That's funny. That's a good one. Yeah.
It's led to some great research opportunities. It's led to some fantastic academic opportunities. It's opened the door for so much amazing advocacy work. I'm now working with the Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation as well as an ambassador, working on enhancing mental health support for healthcare workers. And it's just put me in contact with so many extraordinary people across the country, and just this network of just like brilliant physicians and nurses and vets and dentists and just all of these incredible people in the healthcare community. And it's been such a gift. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, social media, thinking it's just people like doing little dances and well, that's a part of it. But social media can be very much a powerful force for good too, totally. if used correctly. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I think it is one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about putting together episodes like this. And I think every episode, I guess I would say, is something akin to this in a different niche, depending on who the guest is. But it's so easy with the way the algorithms work and whatever messaging hole you get sucked into to allow the negative noise to kind of get to you. And I feel like if
Mhm.
there's at least one space for something to combat that with some positivity, then gosh, I really want to be a part of that. I would love to be able to utilize other people who are doing the same thing to help get that out there. So again, I'm so excited that I get to have you and people like you on here. And it's same thing. It's like there's some days where I'll go to upload the next episode and it was had a handful of listens I can see on the back end. And it seems like at first disheartening. And then you have to remember, like, even if one person had a moment that was meaningful to them and that it's going to
Mm.
be helpful for them, like, that's why I do this. Like, that's all that matters. Like, I'm not out here trying to get famous or rich or anything. I just want
Yeah.
people to understand how you can find your own confidence because it's going to look different for everybody
Mhm.
and how that can help you have a better, healthier, happier life that is going to be meaningful to you. And that's all that matters.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. That
Exactly.
is so cool that you've gotten to have some great experiences like that. And also it's just one of those things where it's a fun little, I guess, crossover because the line of the field of law I work in is healthcare law, and
Mm.
it's on representation of hospital sides in terms of breach of contract disputes with insurance providers or issues where basically medical billing is not being paid as it should be, and therefore there's kind of detriments suffering to be able to pay nursing, pay doctors, all that. Nowhere near what you do, but when I heard you advocate for healthcare in those spaces, because as we've seen a lot of issues as of late
Yeah.
when it comes to insurance, Medicaid, a lot of things that help make sure people have proper care, and it's been under attack. So I love hearing that you get to do some advocacy work with that and help ensure that healthcare is at the forefront of those talks. And that something as simple as posting a video because your son's friend said it would be a fun, easy way to make a video has led to just so many fun and impactful things.
It just snowballed. It's been a wild ride, but a fun one.
Oh my gosh, I bet. Well, in this journey, right? Because again, you started out with the social media just being a way for friends and family to keep up with you, not intending to have any sort of virality, not intending to have any sort of following. But
Yeah.
now that you do have it and kind of getting to know the person that you are with the intention that you live your life, have you thought about what you kind of hope this impact is that you're able to have with this platform?
I mean, I think the impact and kind of just sort of the legacy, for lack of a better word, that I want to kind
Sure.
of leave with the platform and with medicine is not just that of a physician, but just to show that, anyone who feels behind in life, anyone who feels like they started too late at whatever that might be, that dreams don't expire just because time has passed. They don't.
Mm,
And I hope my journey just constantly reminds people that, courage can begin at any age. Dreams can begin at any age. As a future physician, I hope to leave a legacy of compassion as well as competence. That's very big for me. My husband, and he's a very wise man. I quote him incessantly. He always says, nobody will care what you know until they know that you care. And
oh yeah.
that's something that I really want to bring through in my social media as well as my career. I mean, experience has shown me that people remember how you made them feel long after they forget what you said.
Yeah.
I want my patients and I want my followers to feel seen. I want them to feel heard. I want them to feel treated with dignity, especially in those vulnerable moments. And I hope that people I love can kind of see what I'm doing and remember that, hey, my mom, my sister, my friend, she grew instead of shrinking herself as she got older.
Mm.
I want my kids to see that. I often say that, my social media is a love letter to my children because I want them to be able to see, that's my mom, when they get older, that's your grandma. Like what? I want them to see that I chose possibility over regret. I want people to see that even if the path is difficult, don't get off the path. keep showing up for the life you really, really want.
That is awesome. And I guess I'll segue that into just a little offshoot of the same question. Specifically for this one, I will keep it tailored to women and mothers who have maybe deferred dreams or put them on hold for another dream, for motherhood and what that really requires of a woman and what motherhood really takes
Oh,
from
yeah.
you in a beautiful way. But if somebody is even humming and hawing about something, what little piece of advice would you give to kind of maybe just give her the push to really go for it, or just maybe take even the first step on trying to pursue the dream?
That's probably the most common question I get, or most common DM I'll get is, people saying, I want to do fill in the blank. Is it too late? Am I too late? Am I too late? And I always tell people that, too late is just code for fear, just disguised as practicality.
Mm,
So many, often as women, we spend our lives putting everyone first. We put our careers first, we put our partners first, we put our children first, our responsibilities first. And then, one day suddenly you stop and you look and you're like, is there any time left for me?
mm,
And the truth is, there is. As long as you're alive, as long as you're capable of growth and you're willing to begin, your life is still unfolding. It's constantly unfolding.
yeah.
And I always tell women, the hardest part isn't the work. The hardest part is giving yourself permission to want more, because we are
Mm,
so often taught that we need to give to others and that it's selfish to want for yourself. It is not selfish. You are allowed to want more. You are, allowed to believe that you have permission to change. You have permission to dream. You have permission to take up space in this world. Our society constantly tells women that we need to be smaller, both literally and figuratively. We are told to quiet our voices, to make our bodies small. We are told to take up less space. And I always tell women, no, take up space. You are
yes.
allowed to take up space. There's a poem called the Desiderata, which it's very lengthy. I won't read the whole thing, but I recommend everybody look it up. And there's a line in there that I always told my kids growing up when they'd be like, well, I don't know. And I would say, the line is, you are a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars, and you have a right to be here. And that's what I
Mm,
always tell women. I'm like, you have a right to be here. And your life experiences, your age, don't make you behind. You're not behind. You have depth, you have resilience, you have perspective. Days and years are going to pass either way. The question is, do you want to arrive there having honored the life you truly wanted?
you literally gave me chills when you quoted that poem.
I
I love that. I love that so much.
love that poem.
Oh, it's so good. I can go ahead and link it in the episode
Oh,
description. So if
yay.
anybody wants to click through it and take the time to read it in full, we'll give them that opportunity very easily. As we're getting close to wrapping up our time, can you tell us what this next leg of the journey looks like for you? I know residency is starting, and I know we're
Ah,
going to be approaching it, bite by bite.
yes.
You're going to be doing a whole cross country haul for this new setup. And
Mhm.
so, as much as you want to divulge, what specialty did you match into, and kind of what does this next leg entail for Dr. Jen?
Yes, I matched into family medicine. Like I said, my husband and I live in a small town, so rural family medicine was the goal and the dream from the day I started
I love
medical
that.
school. So I'm going to be doing rural family medicine. Very, very excited. So we're going to be trekking across the country in our school bus, towing my Jeep behind it. So it'll be 3 years of residency, and then I have plans to do a fellowship in hospice and palliative care.
Mm,
So I just have seen some very dear loved ones who have had their final stage be under the care of hospice, and
mhm.
it's such a beautiful process. I was very honored to be able to do some hospice and palliative rotations, and it just stole my heart, and just honoring that transition in our lives. So much of
Yeah.
our medicine is about obviously keeping our patients alive, but also I think there's that important piece of when they're ready to transition from life, and I think that's sometimes a forgotten piece that I really want to make sure I honor.
I'm so happy that you've been able to get this journey to be full circle as to kind of one where you wanted to go with rural family care, and then how you've been able to find this, just this nice little cross section of something that has meant so much to you in a personal setting, but how it can also be a part of your professional setting. So that's incredible. We can't wait to keep following the journey. And the last question that I ask all of my guests is, if you had one piece of advice for the listeners to exercise confidence daily, what would it be?
I would say to treat confidence like a practice and not a personality trait. Most people wait to feel confident. They say, oh, I can't speak up. I can't take this risk. I can't try this until I have confidence. And I say, no, confidence is actually built by doing those things before you feel ready. But I'm scared. Great. Do it scared. But I'm worried. Great. Do it worried. But I'm not ready. Great. Do it not ready. But just do it every day. Just do one small thing that just pushes you beyond your comfort zone, even if it's asking a question in a meeting, sharing an idea, trying out for a play, even just the guy who's man-spreading next to you on the subway saying, please move your leg. Do something that pushes you outside of your comfort zone every day. And over time, I think all of those small acts start to teach you that you can survive discomfort. Because we generally don't try things because we don't feel comfortable. But when you push yourself to do it, you realize, yeah, it might have been uncomfortable. I can survive discomfort. And once you start fearing the discomfort so much, the confidence just kind of grows naturally. I mean, so I think I've learned that confidence is less about believing, oh, I'll never fail, and more about trusting it'll be okay if I do. Don't be afraid to fail.
I love it. And it's so, seeing another way that somebody is able to explain the whole sentiment of exercise confidence. It is not something where, you're just going to wake up one day and be like, okay, I've done it. I've read all the books. I've decided to think all the good thoughts and now I'm confident. It is the sentiment that it is just like a muscle. It is just like our bodies. If we want to grow it and if we want it to be strong, you just keep working at it little by little, and it falls into its place. And it's not something that is ever fully fine-tuned or polished or finished or at its apex. It is just something that we keep working at. So
exactly.
Just thank you so much for your time. I thank you so much for your wisdom. And we just can't wait to keep watching you succeed and your journey as it continues to unfold. And congratulations again, you freaking med school graduate.
Woohoo! Thank you so much for having me. This was so wonderful.